The wedding dress hung in the closet like a ghost of broken promises. Victoria Hayes had paid for it herself, every penny saved from her salary as an elementary school teacher. She remembered the day she'd tried it on, how the silk had felt against her skin, how she'd imagined walking down the aisle toward Michael. That was before the doctor's appointment, before the word infertile had shattered everything she thought her future would hold. Now, 3 months after Michael had ended their engagement, Victoria sat in her small apartment, surrounded by moving boxes. The dress was packed away, destined for donation. Tomorrow would mark her first day at Thornfield Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in Manhattan. The position had appeared like a lifeline when she needed it most. A fresh start in a new city, far from the pitying looks and whispered conversations of her hometown. Victoria's phone buzzed with another message from her mother. She ignored it. The conversation would be the same as always. Concerns about her being alone, suggestions about adoption, thinly veiled disappointment that she hadn't tried harder to keep Michael, as if she could have changed her biology through sheer willpower. The morning arrived with dianical New York chaos, sirens, construction noise, and the perpetual hum of millions of lives intersecting. Victoria dressed carefully in a navy blazer and cream blouse, determined to make a good impression. Thornfield Academy occupied an entire block on the Upper East Side, its limestone facade speaking of old money and older traditions. The building had once been a mansion, and walking through its doors felt like stepping into a different era. Principal Margaret Whitmore greeted her with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're delighted to have you, Miss Hayes. Your credentials are impressive. Harvard education, 5 years of teaching experience, stellar recommendations." She paused, her gaze assessing. "We have high standards here. Our students come from prominent families who expect excellence." Victoria nodded, swallowing her nervousness. "I understand completely. Good. Now, there's something I should mention." Mrs. Whitmore's voice dropped slightly. "One of our families requires special attention. The Westbrook children, 4 of them spanning grades 1 through 6. Their father, Harrison Westbrook, is on our board of directors. He's very particular about their education and care." The name sounded vaguely familiar, though Victoria couldn't place it. "I'll do my best with all my students, Mrs. Whitmore." "I'm sure you will, but understand that Mr. Westbrook has been through several teachers this year alone. He's demanding. The children have had difficulties adjusting since their mother's passing 2 years ago." Victoria's heart squeezed with unexpected empathy. Children dealing with loss, that was something she understood, even if her own losses were different in nature. "I appreciate the context. When will I meet them?" "This afternoon. He insisted on interviewing you personally before allowing you to teach his children." Mrs. Whitmore checked her watch. "You have your morning classes first. His assistant will collect you at 3 o'clock. The morning passed in a blur of new faces and nervous energy. Victoria's 3rd grade class responded well to her interactive teaching style, their enthusiasm reminding her why she'd chosen this profession in the first place. But as 3 o'clock approached, her stomach knotted with anxiety. Everything about this felt unusual. What kind of parent interviewed teachers after they'd already been hired? A woman in an impeccable grey suit appeared at her classroom door precisely at 3. "Miss Hayes? I'm Jennifer, Mr. Westbrook's executive assistant. Please follow me." They walked through corridors Victoria hadn't seen during her morning tour, eventually reaching an elevator that required a special key. The doors opened onto what appeared to be a private floor, part office, part living space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Central Park. Harrison Westbrook stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, his voice clipped and authoritative. "I don't care about their timeline. Tell them to meet our terms or walk away." He ended the call and turned around. Victoria's breath caught. The man before her couldn't have been more than 40, with dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to see straight through her professional armor. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his presence filled the room with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "Miss Hayes," his voice was deep, controlled. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." She took the offered chair, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "Mr. Westbrook, I understand you wanted to speak with me about your children." "My children have been through 6 teachers in 18 months. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. They're not difficult kids, despite what some might say. They're grieving, they're angry, and they're tired of people giving up on them. I don't give up easily, Victoria said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. His eyebrow lifted slightly. Everyone says that. Then they encounter Chloe's silence or Dylan's outbursts or the twins' coordinated mischief, and suddenly they have other opportunities to pursue. With respect, Mr. Westbrook, I didn't come to New York for easy. I came because I needed a change and because I believe children deserve adults who show up, even when it's hard. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor, perhaps curiosity, perhaps respect. Mrs. Whitmore mentioned you came highly recommended. She didn't mention why someone with your qualifications would leave a position mid-year. Victoria's hands tightened in her lap. This was the moment she'd been dreading. The explanation she'd have to give over and over in this new life. Personal reasons. A relationship ended. I needed a fresh start. I see. He studied her for a long moment, and Victoria had the unsettling feeling he saw far more than she'd intended to reveal. My children need stability, Miss Hayes. They need someone who won't disappear when things get complicated. Can you promise me that? I can promise I'll do everything in my power to be there for them, she said carefully. Life doesn't always allow for guarantees, but my commitment to teaching isn't something I take lightly. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her face. Fair enough. You'll meet them tomorrow. Dylan is 6 and in first grade. The twins Mason and Morgan are 8 and in 3rd grade, and Chloe is 10 in 6th grade. She hasn't spoken since her mother died. Victoria's heart ached at the image. I'll do my best with all of them. See that you do. He stood, signaling the end of the interview. Jennifer will provide you with their schedules and any medical information you need. I expect weekly updates on their progress. As Victoria stood to leave, Harrison spoke again, his voice softer than before. Miss Hayes, thank you for being honest about your reasons for being here. It's refreshing. She turned back, surprised. You're welcome, Mr. Westbrook. Walking back through the elegant corridors, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that this job would be more complicated than she'd anticipated. Harrison Westbrook wasn't just a demanding parent. He was a man carrying his own grief, trying to protect 4 children from a world that had already hurt them too much. And somehow, without quite knowing how it had happened, she just promised to help. That evening, as Victoria unpacked the last of her boxes in her tiny apartment, she found herself thinking about those 4 children she hadn't yet met. Children who'd lost their mother, a man who'd lost his wife, all of them trying to find their way through grief. She pulled out a photo she'd kept hidden at the bottom of a box, the ultrasound image that would never become a baby, the dream that would never become reality. Michael had said he wanted children of his own, biological children, as if the distinction mattered more than love, as if she was somehow less because her body couldn't do what he expected. But maybe, Victoria thought, placing the photo in a drawer and closing it firmly, maybe there were different ways to matter in a child's life. Maybe being chosen wasn't always about biology. She didn't know yet that tomorrow would change everything. She didn't know that 4 grieving children would teach her as much as she taught them, or that their father would see in her something no one else had. Not deficiency, but strength. Not what was missing, but what was there all along. The next morning arrived too quickly. Victoria had barely slept, her mind racing with scenarios about meeting the Westbrook children. She'd taught grieving students before, but never 4 siblings at once. Never children whose father watched over them with such fierce protectiveness. Thornfield Academy's hallways were already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Students in pressed uniforms moved between classes with practiced efficiency, their conversations peppered with references to vacation homes in the Hamptons and upcoming galas. This was a world Victoria had only glimpsed from the outside, and she felt acutely aware of her department store blazer among the designer labels. Her first encounter with the Westbrook children happened during morning assembly. Mrs. Whitmore had pointed them out. 4 dark-haired children sitting together in the 3rd row, creating a small island of isolation in a sea of chattering students. Dylan, the youngest, fidgeted constantly, his small legs swinging beneath the bench. The twins sat on either side of him, mirror images with mischievous eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of their surroundings. And Chloe, the oldest, sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on some distant point that only she could see. Victoria's heart constricted. She recognized that look, the one that said if you stayed quiet enough, maybe the world would forget to hurt you again. After assembly, Jennifer appeared at her elbow. Mr. Westbrook would like you to have lunch with the children today. Private dining room on the 3rd floor, he'll be joining you. Of course he would. Victoria wondered if Harrison Westbrook micromanaged every aspect of his children's lives, or if his scrutiny was reserved specifically for new teachers who needed to prove themselves worthy. The morning classes passed slowly. Victoria threw herself into teaching, but part of her mind remained fixed on the upcoming lunch. At noon, she made her way to the 3rd floor, where Jennifer waited outside an elegant door. "They're already inside," Jennifer said, her expression sympathetic. "Good luck." The private dining room was smaller than Victoria expected, with a round table set for 6 and windows overlooking the school's courtyard. The 4 children sat in a cluster, and Harrison stood near the window, phone in hand as usual. He looked up when she entered. "Miss Hayes, thank you for joining us." He pocketed his phone and gestured to the empty chair. "Children, this is Miss Hayes. She'll be working with you this semester." 4 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Dylan's were curious, the twins skeptical, and Chloe's completely blank. "Hi, everyone," Victoria said, keeping her voice warm but not artificially cheerful. Children could smell fake enthusiasm from a mile away. "I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you." "Are you going to leave like Miss Patterson did?" Mason asked bluntly. "Or was it Morgan?" Victoria made a mental note to find distinguishing features. "Mason, that's not appropriate," Harrison said sharply. "It's okay," Victoria interjected. She looked directly at the boy who'd spoken. "That's a fair question. I know you've had a lot of teachers come and go. I can't promise that nothing will ever change, because life is unpredictable. But I can promise that I'm here because I want to be, and I don't give up on people I care about. You don't even know us yet," the other twin, Morgan, she guessed, pointed out. "That's true, but I'd like to, if you'll give me a chance." Dylan spoke up, his voice small. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Victoria smiled. "I think dinosaurs are fascinating. Do you have a favorite?" "Velociraptor," Dylan said, warming up. "They hunted in packs and were really smart. Smarter than the T-Rex, even though the T-Rex was bigger. Intelligence over size," Victoria nodded. "That's a good philosophy." Throughout this exchange, Chloe remained silent, but Victoria noticed her eyes had focused slightly, as if she was actually listening rather than disappearing into her own world. Harrison watched the interaction with an unreadable expression. When lunch was served, an elaborate affair that made Victoria feel like she was dining at a restaurant rather than a school, he asked, "Miss Hayes, what's your teaching philosophy?" "That every child has something valuable to offer the world, and it's my job to help them discover what that is," she said. "Not to force them into a mold, but to give them tools to build their own future." "Pretty words," Harrison said. "But how do you handle a child who refuses to participate, or one who acts out for attention?" Victoria met his challenging gaze steadily. "I try to understand what they're really saying. Behavior is communication. If a child refuses to participate, maybe they're scared of failing. If they're acting out, maybe they need to feel seen. You can't solve a problem until you understand what it actually is. And if understanding isn't enough, then you keep showing up anyway. Consistency matters more than perfection." Something flickered in Harrison's eyes, surprise perhaps or recognition. Before he could respond, Dylan knocked over his water glass. The liquid spread across the table, and the boy's face crumpled with distress. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "Hey, it's just water," Victoria said quickly, grabbing napkins. "Accidents happen. No big deal." But Dylan's breathing had accelerated, his small chest heaving with the beginning of panic. Harrison moved toward his son, but Victoria was closer. She knelt beside Dylan's chair, keeping her voice calm and low. "Dylan, look at me. Can you name 5 things you can see right now?" The boy blinked, confused but focusing on her face. "The window," he managed. "Your sweater. The napkins. Dad's watch. Morgan's shoes." "Good. Now 4 things you can hear." His breathing was already slowing. Victoria continued through the grounding technique, and by the end, Dylan leaned against her slightly, exhausted but calm. "How did you know to do that?" Harrison asked quietly. "I had a student once who had anxiety. Her therapist taught us grounding techniques." Victoria smoothed Dylan's hair back gently. "Are you okay now?" Dylan nodded, and for the first time, Chloe looked directly at Victoria. Really looked, as if seeing her as a person rather than just another adult passing through their lives. The rest of lunch passed more smoothly. The twins told elaborate stories about their weekend adventures, and Dylan showed her a small dinosaur toy he kept in his pocket. When lunch ended and the children left for their next classes, Harrison asked Victoria to stay behind. "That technique with Dylan," he said. "His therapist has been working with him for months. I've never seen anyone outside the family manage it so quickly. Sometimes an outsider's perspective helps," Victoria said. "He was scared of disappointing you. Once he knew the mistake was truly okay, he could calm down." Harrison studied her with renewed interest. "You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more polished, more impressed by wealth and status, someone trying to win favor." He paused. "Why did you really come to New York, Miss Hayes?" Victoria's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "I told you, personal reasons. A relationship ended. That's what you said." Harrison's gaze was penetrating. "But people don't usually uproot their entire lives over a simple breakup. What aren't you telling me? With respect, Mr. Westbrook, my personal life is my own business, not when it affects my children." The words stung, even though they were fair. Victoria took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "My fiancé left me because I can't have children. He wanted a biological family and I couldn't give him that. So yes, I came here to start over, away from people who look at me like I'm broken. But that doesn't make me any less capable of caring for your children. If anything, it makes me more committed." The confession hung in the air between them. Victoria immediately regretted her honesty, certain she'd just talked herself out of the only job that had felt right in months. But Harrison's expression had softened. "I'm sorry. That was an invasive question. You're protecting your children. I understand that. Still." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, Miss Hayes, your ex-fiancé was a fool. Biology doesn't make a parent. Love does. Showing up does. My children's mother gave birth to them, but you showed more maternal instinct in one lunch than some of their previous teachers showed in months." Victoria blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They're going to test you in ways you can't imagine." But there was warmth in his voice now, and something else, respect maybe, or the beginning of trust. As Victoria left the dining room, her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She'd been honest, vulnerable, and somehow that had been exactly right. The afternoon brought her first official class with the twins, who proved to be exactly as advertised. Intelligent, creative, and determined to test every boundary. But Victoria was ready for them, and as she engaged their mischievous energy into productive creativity, she didn't notice Harrison watching through the observation window, a thoughtful expression on his face. 3 weeks passed in a blur of lesson plans, parent meetings, and gradually breaking through the walls the Westbrook children had built around themselves. Victoria had settled into a rhythm at Thornfield Academy, though she still felt like an outsider among the wealthy families who dominated the school's social hierarchy. The twins had become her shadow during recess, constantly presenting her with increasingly complex riddles and puzzles. Dylan sought her out whenever his anxiety threatened to overwhelm him, finding comfort in her calm presence, but Chloe remained an enigma, present but distant, watching everything with those old, sad eyes. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Victoria was organizing her classroom after dismissal when Jennifer appeared at the door, her usual composure slightly frayed. "Miss Hayes, I need your help. Mr. Westbrook had an emergency meeting in Boston. His flight was supposed to return 2 hours ago, but there's a massive storm system grounding all planes. The children's regular nanny called in sick and the backup can't get here until tomorrow morning." Victoria's pulse quickened. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay with them tonight, at the penthouse. I know it's beyond your job description, but Mr. Westbrook specifically asked for you. He said you're the only person outside family the children feel comfortable with." The request should have felt intrusive, inappropriate even, but Victoria found herself nodding. "Of course, let me just grab my things." An hour later, she stood in the lobby of one of Manhattan's most exclusive residential towers, the twins chattering excitedly on either side of her, while Dylan clutched her hand and Chloe trailed behind. The elevator required a special keycard and opened directly into the Westbrook penthouse. Victoria had thought the school's private floor was impressive, but this was something else entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the setting sun painting the skyline in shades of amber and rose. The space was elegant but surprisingly warm, filled with the comfortable clutter of family life. Children's artwork on the refrigerator, books scattered across coffee tables, photographs everywhere. "Can we show you our rooms?" Morgan asked eagerly. "After homework," Victoria said firmly. "Your dad will want to know you kept up with your responsibilities." The children groaned, but complied, spreading their assignments across the massive dining table. Victoria worked with each of them, marveling at how different they were despite their shared grief. Mason was methodical and precise, Morgan creative and scattered, Dylan enthusiastic but easily distracted, and Chloe, silent as always, completed her work with careful attention to detail. Dinner was an adventure in navigation. Victoria had never cooked in a kitchen with 3 ovens and a refrigerator that cost more than her car. But she managed to produce pasta with vegetables, and the children ate with more enthusiasm than she'd expected. "Miss Patterson always ordered takeout," Mason observed. "She said cooking was too much work." "Well, I like cooking," Victoria said. "It's relaxing." "Our mom used to cook," Morgan said quietly, and the table fell silent. "She made the best chocolate chip cookies. The recipe's still on the fridge, but Dad doesn't make them anymore. I think it makes him too sad." Victoria glanced at the refrigerator, where a recipe card was indeed magnetized to the door, the handwriting feminine and looping. Her heart ached for these children, for Harrison, for the woman whose absence still echoed through every room. "Maybe sometime we could make them together," she suggested carefully. "If your dad says it's okay, sometimes happy memories hurt less when we share them." Dylan nodded solemnly. "I don't want to forget her." "You won't, sweetheart. Love doesn't disappear just because someone isn't here anymore." After dinner, Victoria supervised bath time, a chaotic affair involving more water on the bathroom floor than in the tub, and then settled the children in the media room for a movie. Halfway through, her phone buzzed with a call from Harrison. "Miss Hayes, Jennifer told me about the situation. I can't apologize enough for the imposition." "It's not an imposition," Victoria said, stepping into the hallway so she wouldn't disturb the children. "They're doing fine. We had dinner, homework's done, and we're watching a movie now." "You cooked?" He sounded surprised. "Just pasta. Nothing fancy." She paused. "Mr. Westbrook, they talked about their mother tonight, about her chocolate chip cookies. I hope that was okay. I didn't shut the conversation down." There was a long silence on the other end. When Harrison spoke again, his voice was rough. "No, that's good. Their therapist says we should talk about her more, but it's hard. I don't want to make them sadder." "They're already sad," Victoria said gently. "Talking about her doesn't create the sadness. It just gives it somewhere to go." "When did you become so wise about grief?" "I'm not wise. I just know what it's like to lose something you thought would last forever." Another silence, this one charged with understanding. "I'll be home by tomorrow afternoon. The backup nanny should arrive by 8 a.m., so you don't have to stay past then. I'll stay as long as they need me." After the movie ended, Victoria tucked Dylan and the twins into their beds, but when she went to check on Chloe, the girls' room was empty. Victoria's heart jumped with panic until she heard soft sounds from the balcony. Chloe stood at the railing, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the city lights. Victoria approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Beautiful view," she said softly, standing beside the girl. Chloe didn't respond, but she didn't move away either. "You know, when I was going through a really hard time, someone told me that it's okay to not be okay," Victoria continued. "That you don't have to be strong all the time, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that you're hurting." Chloe's hands tightened on the blanket, and Victoria saw her chest hitch with suppressed emotion. "I can't imagine how hard it must be," Victoria said. "Losing your mum, watching your dad and brothers struggle, feeling like maybe if you're quiet enough, if you don't cause problems, it won't hurt as much." She paused. "But Chloe, your voice matters. Your feelings matter. You matter." The girl's shoulders began to shake, and then, for the first time in 2 years, Chloe spoke. Her voice was rusty from disuse, barely more than a whisper. "I miss her so much." Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she pulled the girl into her arms. Chloe collapsed against her, finally releasing the grief she'd been holding for so long. They stood together on the balcony while the city sprawled below them, 2 people who understood what it meant to lose something irreplaceable. Later, after Chloe had cried herself to sleep in her room, Victoria sat in the living room, emotionally exhausted but oddly peaceful. Her phone rang again. Harrison. Is everything all right? You didn't answer your phone for 2 hours. Everything's more than all right, Victoria said, and she told him about Chloe speaking. Harrison's response was immediate. I'm catching the first flight out, storm or no storm. I need to be there. Harrison, she used his first name without thinking. She's sleeping now, peacefully. The breakthrough happened and it's beautiful, but she needs rest. Come home safely, not frantically. You called me Harrison. Victoria blushed, grateful he couldn't see her face. I'm sorry, Mr. Westbrook. Don't apologize. I like it. His voice was warm, intimate in a way that made her heart skip. Victoria, what you've done for my family in 3 weeks. I don't have words. I just showed up. That's all. That's everything. He paused. I'll see you tomorrow. And Victoria, thank you for seeing them, for caring. After they hung up, Victoria walked through the quiet penthouse, looking at the family photographs that covered every surface. Harrison and a beautiful woman with dark hair and a radiant smile. The children at various ages, growing up in frozen moments, a family that had been complete and was now learning to be whole again in a different way. She thought about Michael, about the future she'd mourned. But standing here, surrounded by evidence of love that transcended biology, she realized something profound. Family wasn't about DNA or traditional expectations. It was about showing up, about choosing to care, about being there when it mattered. And for the first time since her diagnosis, Victoria felt something she'd thought was lost forever: hope. Harrison arrived home the next afternoon, his usual composure visibly shaken. Victoria was helping the twins with an art project when she heard the elevator doors open. The children's faces lit up, and they rushed to their father, who dropped his briefcase to embrace them all at once. Dad, Miss Hayes made pancakes for breakfast, Dylan announced, and she didn't burn them like you do. High praise indeed, Harrison said, but his eyes were searching for someone else. Where's Chloe? In her room, reading, Victoria said, standing back to give the family space. She's been quiet today, but that's normal after an emotional breakthrough. She needs time to process. Harrison nodded, then turned to his children. Why don't you guys finish your project? I need to talk to Miss Hayes for a moment. He led Victoria to his home office, a space lined with books and dominated by a massive desk that overlooked Central Park. Once the door closed, the professional distance he usually maintained seemed to dissolve. Tell me everything, he said. What exactly did Chloe say? Victoria recounted the balcony conversation, watching Harrison's face transform with emotion. When she finished, he sat heavily in his chair, covering his face with his hands. 2 years, he said, his voice breaking. 2 years of therapists and specialists, and you reached her in 3 weeks. How? I didn't do anything special, Harrison. I just listened. And maybe... She hesitated. Maybe she needed someone who understood loss differently. Someone who wasn't part of her before world. Harrison looked up at her, and Victoria saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not just gratitude, but something deeper, more complicated. You're remarkable, he said quietly. Do you know that? I'm really not. I'm just a teacher who cares deeply, who sees people, who shows up even when it's hard. He stood, moving closer. Victoria, these past 3 weeks, watching you with my children, you've given them something I couldn't. Hope. The belief that they can be happy again. They were always capable of that. They just needed time. And you. Harrison was close enough now that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the faint lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and carried burdens. My children need you. And I... He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. I need to tell you something. Before he could continue, Dylan's voice called from the hallway. Dad, Chloe wants to show you something. The moment broke, and they returned to find Chloe standing in the living room, holding a piece of paper. Her voice was still soft, uncertain, but it was there. I wrote about Mum, she said. For my English assignment. Miss Hayes said it was okay to write about people we love, even if they're not here anymore. Harrison's eyes filled with tears as he read his daughter's essay. When he finished, he pulled Chloe into a fierce embrace. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Mum would be so proud of you. Miss Hayes helped me find the words, Chloe said. Then, turning to Victoria with an earnestness that squeezed her heart. Will you stay? please? We don't want another teacher who leaves." Victoria looked at Harrison, whose expression was equally hopeful, equally vulnerable. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Victoria continued teaching at Thornfield, but her relationship with the Westbrook family deepened beyond the professional. She attended Dylan's soccer games, helped the twins with their science fair project, and had long conversations with Chloe about books and loss and healing. And Harrison was present in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. He started joining family dinners when his schedule allowed, staying to help with homework, asking her opinion on decisions about the children. The boundaries between teacher and family friend blurred, then disappeared entirely. One evening, 2 months after Chloe's breakthrough, Harrison asked Victoria to stay after the children went to bed. They sat on the penthouse balcony, the city glittering below them, and he handed her a glass of wine. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I've been trying to say for weeks." Victoria's heart pounded. "Okay. When Jennifer first showed me your resume, I saw a qualified teacher. When I interviewed you, I saw someone honest and capable. But watching you with my children, getting to know you..." He turned to face her fully. "Victoria, I see someone extraordinary, someone who makes my children laugh again, someone who makes this house feel like a home instead of a museum of grief." "Harrison, let me finish. Please." He took a breath. "My wife's death devastated me. I thought I'd never feel anything again except responsibility and exhaustion, but you've awakened something I thought was buried forever. You make me want to be more than just a father trying to survive each day. You make me want to be happy again." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. "I don't know what to say." "Say you feel it too. Say I'm not imagining this connection between us." "You're not imagining it," Victoria whispered. "But Harrison, I'm broken in ways that matter. I can't give you more children. I can't..." "Stop." He took her hands in his. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who loved my children before she ever met me, who put their healing above her own comfort, who shows up every single day with patience and kindness and strength." His voice intensified. "You think you're broken because you can't have biological children? Victoria, you're already a mother to my 4. You became their family the moment you chose to care. Biology has nothing to do with it. Michael said Michael was a fool who didn't deserve you. And I swear, if you'll give me a chance, I'll spend every day proving that you're more than enough. More than I ever hoped to find again." Victoria looked into Harrison's eyes and saw her own hope reflected back. This man, who could have anyone, who lived in a world of wealth and privilege, was choosing her. Not despite her infertility, but understanding it, accepting it, seeing past it to who she actually was. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I. But maybe we can be terrified together." When he kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise, Victoria felt something shift inside her. The grief she'd carried for so long didn't disappear. Loss didn't work that way, but it made room for something else. Joy, possibility, a future she'd stopped letting herself imagine. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the Westbrook penthouse wearing a simple cream dress, surrounded by the 4 children who'd become hers in every way that mattered. Harrison stood beside her, and a small gathering of friends and family watched as they exchanged vows. "I promise to love your children as my own," Victoria said, her voice strong and clear, "because they already are. I promise to remind you every day that you're not broken, you're perfect," Harrison responded. That family isn't about biology. It's about choosing to show up, to care, to love fiercely even when it's hard. Chloe, serving as the flower girl, spoke up unexpectedly. "And we promise to never make you regret choosing us." The whole room laughed through tears as Victoria pulled the girl into a hug. Never, not for 1 second. Later, after the celebration ended and the children were asleep, Victoria and Harrison stood on the balcony where so much had changed. She thought about the wedding dress still packed away in storage, the future she'd mourned, the pain that had brought her to New York. "Do you ever wonder how different things would be if Michael hadn't left?" Harrison asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Sometimes," Victoria admitted, "but then I remember that pain has a purpose. It broke me open, but it also brought me here, to these children, to you, to a family I never knew I was meant to have." "Do you regret any of it?" Victoria looked through the window at the 4 sleeping children, at the man beside her who'd chosen to love all of her, broken pieces and all. She thought about the classroom where she'd first met the Westbrook children, about Chloe's first words in 2 years, about Dylan's dinosaur toys and the twins' elaborate pranks, and all the ordinary moments that had built this extraordinary life. "Not 1 second," she said firmly. "Every heartbreak led me here. Every rejection taught me what real love looks like. I was rejected for being barren, but a lonely billionaire with 4 children didn't see a deficit. He saw someone capable of loving beyond biology, someone who could help his family heal, someone who could make a home not with her womb but with her heart." Harrison pulled her close. "Best choice I ever made." "Second best," Victoria corrected with a smile. "The best was letting me stay that first night when the storm grounded your flight." "That's when everything changed." "No," Harrison said softly. "Everything changed the moment you walked into my life and saw my children as people, not problems. The moment you chose to care when you could have walked away. That's when I knew." Below them, the city continued its endless rhythm, millions of stories unfolding, lives intersecting, futures being written. And in this penthouse high above it all, a teacher who'd been told she could never be a mother tucked 4 children into bed each night. A man who'd thought he'd never love again had found someone who made his heart remember how. Family, Victoria had learned, wasn't about blood or biology or traditional definitions. It was about showing up. About choosing love even when the world said you weren't enough. About 4 grieving children and 1 broken woman finding wholeness together. She'd been rejected for being barren, but she'd been chosen for being exactly who she was, and that made all the difference.